Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we'll be setting sail in the Kirov, the Tier 5 Soviet cruiser, in a Tier 7 standard battle on the map Fault Line. This is the first of two videos in which we'll be analysing the recent buff to the Kirov and the net effect it has on the overall gameplay in my experience. Whereby this is the worst case matchmaking scenario, a Tier 7 game with a good number of Tier 7s and some Tier 6s and 5s thrown in. We're going to be starting off by going forward towards the landmass in front of us and using it to essentially conceal our position and fire over a landmass, keeping our distance because we've got quite low shell arcs. But where are my manners? Let's talk about what the actual buff was. In short, update 0.6.13 increased the reload rate of the ship from 15 seconds to 13.5 seconds, a 10% improvement in DPM, and as a result that means that the ship is able to do, in Wargaming's own words, more damage over the course of a game. This does occur in experience, whereby what you're going to see over the course of this game is that very quickly you can rack up significant amounts of damage. But unlike the previous iteration where it took you just a little bit more time, that damage will come faster. But more importantly is the fact you can exploit key positions on the battlefield even more. And this opening segment, the opening 3 minutes here, will demonstrate that very well. Now the reason we're going to be concealing ourselves in this position is because we don't have that much armour. And the Kirov's always had a reputation of being that glass cannon, whereby with only 50mm of citadel armour belt all the way along the broadside of the ship, going from the fore turret to the aft turret, you're going to lose your 26,200 HP health very quickly if someone knows when to fire armour piercing at you. And with the long profile of this ship and the fact it's got a god-awful turn circle of 860 metres and a 7.8 second rudder shift, if you expose your broadside, you should expect to be punished. So by being here, we're going to rely on the spotting of the T-22s on our team, whereby they can use their improved concealment as of update 0.6.13 once again, in order to spot the Cleveland and the Marblehead that are coming this way. And you'll see that we've already switched to armour piercing. Because another thing about the Kirov is it's got extremely powerful armour piercing for its tier, being able to citadel for 4,100 HP per shell, as this Marblehead will demonstrate for us. Now in our first salvo, picking up 3 citadels, a penetration and 2 overpens, that's pretty much 14,500 health off that Marblehead, and their game, as far as we're concerned with this second salvo, is over. Now note here we do not provide enough lead to counter the fact the Marblehead sped up in their turn. We only picked up 2,500 damage, but we're getting the damage out, and we're firing continuously as we throw in a third salvo, this time towards the Cleveland. But note the Gator and the Fiji off to our left hand side and how they're going to be timed perfectly to coincide with our reloads here. And this is why I personally think the improved reload rate on the ship really makes a noticeable difference. The fact that you can be ready now to fire into these situations a lot more easily as we knock off 5,600 health of the Gator and we're ready to go again on this Fiji who's going to expose themselves to us at the perfect time. Now if we were in the old Kirov, the 15-second reload, we may have had some of these salvos ready as we take off 11,000 health of that Fiji, but not as many, or they perhaps would not have been as ideal. We could have clipped the Citadel of the Fiji for example, but we may not have got the additional shells as well. So that's one thing to consider straight away, is that in the opening 3 minutes we racked up 36,000 HP of damage, and we can attribute some of that at least to the improved reload rate. We haven't done anything else so far. Now you're wondering at this point why I'm just starting to push forward. Well, I think that Fiji is going to sit in the smoke and fall victim to our T-22's torps. I'm starting to cut my speed here, but as soon as I see them die, I'll be charging forward. The logic being I want to rush that smoke screen because the only thing that could be in it right now is the enemy Gator, and I can rush it with my hydroacoustic and spot them. I can also spot incoming torpedoes for my teammates who are off to my starboard side at this point, and with our 3.3 kilometer detection of torpedoes, if I remember correctly, on our hydroacoustic, it's not very powerful, but it'll be helpful to our team. And we can use our top speed of 35.5 knots to close the distance very rapidly. Now one thing that does need to also be kept in mind at this point is the fact that we're not doing anything different here. We are aware of the situation, there's only 2 enemy ships here from what we understand, so we're feeling quite confident. This confidence would be with us regardless of whether we had the DPM boost or not, as we cut underneath a Cleveland salvo, only taking the 1 hit to our steering gear. Having to repair it because the turn circle of this ship being so large that 860 metres, and the fact that if we do get caught in a turn without a rudder, we're going to be exposing the broadside of the ship to the very powerful American Pearson at Cleveland, things are going to get painful very fast. So we still have the fragility element of this ship, which is why as the Cleveland comes up now, we'll be in a prime position to hit them. We're not going to expose our rear turret. We'll be only firing from the front, because we don't want to give them any excuse to lob armour piercing at us. Now the Cleveland will come around the corner, but one thing we make the mistake of is being too close for the engagement, and therefore we're going to start getting more overpens than we are penetrations or citadels. Ideally we want to be a little bit further back than this. But still we can do good damage. Perhaps we're not aiming in the most ideal position on the enemy ship either, but we're knocking off a good amount of health. And with that Cleveland turning, we're going to switch our aim towards the Gator shortly to try and score some hits on them as they turn broadside, and we want to try and make sure our armour piercing penetrates rather than over penetrates on the widened hull of that German destroyer. Only 2 over penetrations, but it was worth a try. Switching back now to the Cleveland, who's angled enough and pulled a little bit more distance that we can citadel the angled armour here. Again, the power of the armour piercing. Now that Cleveland out of the game, another cruiser eliminated on the enemy team, we can begin to push forward a little bit more. But again, we haven't done anything we wouldn't normally do, we've just been able to bring greater DPM to bear. We're looking towards the Gator, but more importantly we're also considering the Colorado, and we can see how the Gator's 150mm armour piercing here is cutting into our broadside armour very nicely from their perspective as we return fire. But we don't want to rush out on the Colorado here. Instead we're just waiting for them to gradually come round, in the meantime looking at the Gator and trying to encourage them to perhaps back off a little bit. Now what should be noted is we are running this ship with Concealment Expert, which is why our detectability by sea is 12.1 kilometers and our detectability by air is 6.6 kilometers. This is not a conventional concealment level build. We do have the skills in place. Therefore we can afford to perhaps get a little bit closer to our foes, and we switch to high explosive here to try and do some additional damage to that blasted destroyer, scoring a nice set of hits. Pulling back, we know the Colorado is coming around, and we're just wanting to finish off that destroyer so the Colorado has no support, no ability to go to smoke. Hopefully this will get the job done. Gator's pretty much on its last legs, but now we do have to switch to the Colorado and bring the armour pierce now. Now again, what does the DPM boost confer on this ship? What it essentially does, as our friendly destroyer, the T-22, says smoke, very nice of them, it enables us to rip down the health of enemy battleships faster, and if the Colorado wasn't exposed in a broadside here, we'd use high explosive. One other thing to note as well is because of our Concealment Expert skill, we have the ability to fire within smoke and only get detected at 8 kilometers, which is ideal for us. It means the Colorado cannot see us in return, unless they try to guess where we are in the smoke. An advantage. We're now going to switch to high explosive, and at this point what we can see is that the DPM has or confers we should say, the ability to set more fires over time with our 13% fire chance. It is again an ideal situation whereby we can sap away the health of that battleship from the concealment of the smoke and make the most of the situation. But again, repeating myself in a way, well, there's nothing different from what we'd normally do in playing this ship, i.e. using concealed positions, using range to whittle down the health of bigger foes, particularly in a Tier 7 game and that Tier 7 battleship. At the same time, we're still extremely conscious of how fragile we are, and we think that the Colorado's turn its guns towards us, so we're rushing behind cover quickly. A bit unfortunate we're not scoring any fires, but that's the way it is. So instead, we're going back to the armour piercing because the Colorado is now coming onto a broadside situation once again. So nothing new so far apart from the ability to do enhanced levels of damage, much like the build that Wargaming have said. Does it feel as though at the moment we are effectively then overpowered at this point? No, we're using sense and knowledge of how our ship is going to play out in order to make the most of the DPM boost. So it's a welcome change so far, and if anything it's really starting to give the Kirov a sense of identity in my opinion, where before, and please excuse my ignorance in what I'm about to say for those of you who are massive Furataka fans, I have personally felt that this was just a less armoured, faster Furataka with weaker torpedoes, but effectively greater gun range. Now that does sound like a bit of a cop-out, perhaps it does sound a little bit, should we say, misinformed, but from playing the two ships a bit, that's the way it felt, because they both had the same reloads and they both have very powerful guns. The Furataka having 8-inch guns versus your 180mm. But now that you have this higher fire rate, you really do get the feel as though this is the harassment cruiser. This is the ship that wants to sit at long range. God bless that Colorado getting away with pretty much murder there. The torpedoes just stop him before they hit the ship. And therefore we can really annoy foes now and really make the most of our guns and use one of the key strengths of the ship, which is its phenomenal range and firepower in tandem in order to be able to rack up the damage. And I think that's what the ship was made for, rather than the perception that they used to be in the past, or at least when I used to play against it, as we pick up the kill on the Colorado, in that the Kirov was brilliant at slamming out that one salvo on that cruiser that went from full health, such as the Tenryu, down to pretty much its last 25%, or just got wiped straight away. That's the perception I used to have, but now the perception of the ship that I have is that actually what it's able to do is become a real long-range threat, or a concealed threat on the battlefield. Concealed in terms of the position it takes and the ability to shoot over land masses if positioned right. So now with that, we're going to start making our way towards the enemy cap. We can see that the enemy team, despite having less ships than us, is quite confident by the looks of things and has set up a nice set of defensive positions, and we do need to push in. Unfortunately, the setup of this push is quite the reverse of what would be ideal, whereby we've got two of our battleships on the front, and then we've got two destroyers, myself and the Pensacola cruiser behind. Now, it's not a criticism of any player here, it's just not the most ideal situation, is what I'm thinking in my mind, and really, we do need to get those battleships behind us. Alternatively, we need to get the rest of our fleet in front of those guys, and we've still got the Cleveland all the way up in the north protecting our own cap circle. Now the thing is, we have the range to be able to rack out the fire here, and that's why we're aiming towards the New York, because we want to set a continuous stream of fires, get them burning as much as possible, bring that health pool down. We can see that with a little bit of practice and the fact that New York's quite a big and slow ship, we're able to use our guns effectively even at these extreme ranges where they really suffer muscle velocity drop off. This is again where the DPM can be used to its advantage, whereby you can just keep the shells coming and coming and coming. Of course, when you get to the closer ranges, whether it's a case of 13.5 seconds to 15 seconds, the DPM is nice, but at the same time you're not always perhaps using it to boost your output as much. It really does feel as though you want to exploit the long range of the ship, and in this scenario we really can do so, and that's where the DPM comes in nicely. Unfortunately, our New York falls to the torpedoes of the Sims, and now we're in a bit of a situation whereby in a minute, when our King George falls, because they've really taken some hits as well, perhaps some additional torpedoes, we're now the lead ship alongside two T-22s and a Pensacola behind us, which is not good. There's a smoke screen as well, which is concealing the New York, the ship we wanted to pound into the dust. They've now come out. We're going to load some armor piercing. They're in a good situation for us to throw that armor piercing in, use its penetrating qualities. But now with our King George down, and the fact that we're the next target in terms of who's been spotted and who's not, we really do need to run. Now this is standard practice because we know we can't take the hits, especially if that New York hits us with 1 or 2 armor piercing shells and one of those is a Citadel. Our game is pretty much over. The other thing to perhaps think about whilst this is going on is the fact, what about the adrenaline rush skill as we pick up our Confederate and we set a fire on that New York once again? Well, of course you will benefit just as much as you used to technically from the adrenaline rush skill, but the difference is now that after losing half your health, as we just pretty much have, your reload is now going to drop from 13.5 seconds to an effective reload of, as we're about to see, hopefully with open fire, just a tiny bit over 11 seconds. Whereas before it used to drop to 13.5 seconds. So yes, again, the DPM boost does come through. And it means that you can continuously pump out the fire and pull distance from foes who may otherwise rip you to pieces. It's unfortunate we still can't see the New York because we'd love to get more damage on them, and something else is spotting us right now. We assume it's the Sims, and the fact we're being radio located, we've got a good strong feeling it's probably the Sims using the radio location skill. We take some more hits on the New York, nothing major, and we return fire. Again, wanting to pull the distance and just harass them for the rest of that health. Because we'll make the most of that fire chance, and if you can send out more shells and hit with more high explosive shells, then you can rack up more fires. But herein lies a bit of an issue. We've got an enemy Knives Out off to what is our starboard side at a reasonable range, and they seem to be aiming to attempt to bring us down on our broadside. The problem is, of course, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place because we've got the New York directly to our rear and we've got the Knives Out off to our starboard side. So angling is going to be a little bit more difficult, and we'll try to angle such that both of them will need to shoot an angled chip. As the Knives Out opens fire with some more high explosive, fortunate there. And we only take one glance in below. We return fire and continue to try to set the fires as the New York also slams in some rounds, but our angling seems to be enabling us to hold up a little bit as we continue to increase our speed, and our Cleveland has come into the game again. They're on quite low health however, so however long they're going to last is a little bit uncertain. We can see that a fire has been set on the Nizao, and we're going to hopefully get a second one on them. Again, that's our intention at this point, to try and bleed the health of these very healthy battleships that are appearing. And it appears we've been able to break the targeting of the Nizao, whereby they're now targeting our friendly Cleveland. But in the process, of course, we have left our friendly Pensacola by themselves down in the south, so we're pretty much split. Two of us up north, one of us down south. It's not a good situation, and this is looking worse and worse as the game goes on. But again, by continuously firing at this point, we can keep the damage coming out and hopefully set a fire on that New York to finish them off. We open fire again, and that's the thing that needs to be pointed out as well. Note how throughout the course of this game we've not stopped firing wherever possible, and that enables us to bring about the DPM boost rather than a case of just firing off a salvo and then waiting for a bit. And we cut our speed there, looking at priority target to give us an idea that the Nizao was perhaps aiming in another salvo, and one more fire set on that New York gets them out of the game alongside some more high explosive hits. So as a result, now it's a case of 2 versus 3. But the problem is we haven't got much health left. Our Cleveland definitely hasn't got much health left, so you can probably guess where this is going. Or is it? No spoilers yet. In the meantime, we can't really affect this game anymore by making a big push. We just have to harass the Nizao in particular. We want that gone because it's still got so much health and it's got so much firepower to bear. As they come around again on our starboard side and they're targeting us, we really want them out the game. And again, we will use the DPM boost here to try and set the fires that are necessary to bring down the health of that ship. But as we can see at these longer ranges, we're not too used to providing the lead required as we pull more and more distance to maximise how much dispersion is on the Nizao's very inaccurate guns in general. And with the Cleveland having already set a fire, we need to now aim towards the front of the enemy Nizao to set the follow-up fire. Dispersion not always being the kindest in this game, we should note. Despite the accuracy of these guns being rather good, 135 metres of dispersion at our maximum range. And we're starting to get some more hits in. And we're hoping, just hoping, we can start to rack up some damage. We would perhaps get a little bit closer, but we do, and in fact we are angling slightly towards the Nizao. The logic being, if we can just pull a little bit distance, when our Cleveland eventually falls, the Nizao will have a bit of difficulty in anticipating, is the Kirov going to come towards them, is it going to pull away? But we're not heading straight towards them because we're aware of the limitations on our turn circle and our rudder. Now the Sims takes out our Cleveland, so now it is a case of 1 versus 3. The only thing we can do is try to rip into the Nizao. The Sims is very far behind, they're not really in this engagement, it's a 1 versus 1 for the time being. We are going to have to angle towards the German battleship at this point. And we're just going to have to ride it out, provide an angling to try and get underneath or deflect the armour piercing rounds as they come in, minimising the likelihood of a citadel, and we'll just have to grind this battle out. But we welcome the fact we've got the faster reload, i.e. the improved base fire rate on the ship, as we set another fire. Now it's not going to be enough to kill the Nizao outright. Perhaps we should be switching to armour piercing at this point, because they are exposing quite a significant broadside to us, but that's a mistake we've made for this game. So we've kept our speed quite low here to dodge more incoming shells. Hoping to perhaps get that second fire just as they go behind the landmass. It's just not going to happen by the looks of things. And here we're perhaps thinking the Nizao may get greedy and come charging around the corner to pick us off. So we are going to try and use our rather limited range torpedoes. You get 2 triple sets, 1 to each side, to catch them out. Switch on our Hydra as well, just in case they try throwing torpedoes off to the right hand side of the island in front of us, which is where we're going. We are being spotted by the spotter aircraft. As we launch our 4-kilometre torpedoes here, which they're not too bad, they lack the range, but they're a nice last resort weapon. We toss them out, and maybe, just maybe, we might clip the Nizao if they decided to sail too close, albeit they're going to know those torpedoes are coming thanks to the spotter aircraft. In the meantime, we see on the minimap the Sims has appeared, and because they're a very stealthy ship compared to our own, we know they must be opening fire to be spotted at a range in excess of 12 kilometres. So we're going to start turning towards them, hoping that the landmass off to our now port side will conceal us from the Nizao as we take out the spotter plane. So we're trying to use the landmass to keep our engagements as 1 versus 1s rather than 2 versus 1s. But as we can see, with only 30 seconds remaining, we can't change the outcome of this game. We have lost, unfortunately. And shortly I will concede defeat in the chat. I won't go down without swinging a few more rounds towards the Sims, but I will acknowledge there is nothing I can do, and it was a good game on the whole. As we open fire for the last time. With that, and the conclusion of this match, let's go take a look at the post-game stats. Not the win we wanted, but we'll accept the defeat gracefully. We can see that we dealt out 137,387 HP of damage in total, and picked up 2 heroic achievements. Firstly, the Confederate, for damaging at least 6 enemy ships, whereby the damage caused to each ship exceeds 20% of the normal health pool, and also the High Caliber, for damaging at least 4 enemy ships, whereby the damage caused must exceed 30% of the total health pool of all the ships in the enemy team. Looking at the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 1,524. What's interesting is the fact that our base experience tally came about through a singular tactic which we employed throughout the game, and that was firing from the mid to back position, rather than being on the front line. Whether it be at the start where we assisted our team in pushing down one side of the map, or alternatively the fighting retreat at the end, we were always in the mid to back line position, meaning that we were never at the forefront to take the hit. And in a way that goes to echo how the DPM buff is welcome, and it means we can harass enemy ships more and maximise our damage output. But on the other hand, it's not going to hide away the fact that this is a fragile ship at the end of the day, which lacks armour, has speed, but is clumsy in its handling. I mean, it's not ideal for pushes, but it's ideal for being able to continuously whittle down the health of its foes, as long as they're spotted and in a position at which you can fire. Looking at our detailed report, the key item we have to note here is how the pattern in our damage caused reflects that mid to backline harassment and engagement role, whereby when our opponents were in the ideal situation for us to fire armour piercing at exposed broadsides, especially on cruisers and battleships, we switched to the armour piercing and we dealt out a lot of damage, i.e. 73,170, with a rather low number of armour piercing shells compared to the majority of our shells being high explosive. At which point we did less base damage, but we also have to add in the fire damage we dealt, which brings our tally closer to our total armour piercing damage. In essence, it means that being in that position to wreak out damage and be that continuous annoyance or threat on the battlefield is key in the Kirov, and the DPM buff enables us to do this more so. And finally, coming on to our credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walked away 333,118 silver credits and 2,286 commander experience. To conclude, I personally feel that in the case of Tier 7 matches, the fire rate improvement conferred to the Kirov as of patch 0.6.13 improves its effectiveness in those mid to long range engagements. But not in terms of its ability to just continuously deal damage. You could do that with the 15-second reload, albeit at a slower rate. But it's the fact you now have a fire rate that enables you to punish foes when they expose themselves in open waters and present their broadsides. Something that was just a little bit too difficult before, perhaps, in the case of multiple foes where you had the 15-second reload, as the start of today's gameplay hopefully went to show. What it means as a result is you become more independent of your Tier 5 counterparts, and you no longer feel like just a Tier 5 cruiser that got thrown into a Tier 7 game because matchmaking said so. If anything, you can now feel a little bit more confident that you have the ability to punish your higher tier counterparts, and if anything, you've now become a long-range problem, which the enemy team will definitely have to deal with. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel, including the second part of this Kirov analysis next week, where we take a look at the ship in a Tier 5 match. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.